This is Soccer 101 with Moon and Rocchio.
Welcome back to Soccer 101. I'm Moon, and that is Rocchio, and we got a lot to cover. So last week was a bye week, so nothing to talk about there, but plenty to talk about off of the pitch, Rocchio, including a couple signings. We'll close out with, obviously, the game that is happening this weekend. It's Houston versus STL back in Houston. But we got Sam Adeniran news to talk about. We got league transparency and kind of the first batch of a bunch of different announcements that's coming out about transparency for contracts and how the team allocated money works and the designated player stuff works, who's getting paid what. Yeah, how it all makes sense. It's crazy.
Can I ask, Moon, because obviously, you know, you're the fan, voice of the fan on the podcast. So I got to say, how much do you care about these things like MLS? Just how much do you care about the transparency? How much do you care about the actual roster rules? Or do you just want to, or are you more just like, you know what, they pay guys like Lutz a lot of money to figure this stuff out. I'll let him do that, and I'll just comment on the players once they get finalized. I'll have a couple favorites on the transfer market, but I'm not going to get too heady about how many U22 spots versus TAM spots versus DP spots and all that stuff.
So my view is I would like fans, including myself and anybody else, to be able to get as deep as they want. So although
That's
I think
a great
it's
way to put it.
It's probably better for most of us not to care, or not to care too far of an extent, right? But at the same time, like the more and more you get into the sport, the more and more you get into everything that's happening off the field. I was such a huge fan of the EPL because when I was drawn in by Manchester United's treble and then some friends of mine and my buddy who works at Nike really got me into Manchester United, which was convenient because they were a Nike club for a while there. I started watching the EPL and I got into the players, and then you start getting into the coaches, and then you start getting into the details and the weeds about what makes this league so cool, what makes these players from all over the planet want to come here. And it's not just money. Sometimes it's the chemistry of the club or how the philosophy of the club has worked for 130 years or whatever it may be. So when you break it down to the MLS talking about this transparency sort of stuff and the designated players and who gets what. And I do think it matters. And all these other sports, you know, everybody's arguing over the NHL thing, putting these guys on long-term injured reserve and then sneaking them back in for the playoffs. And like those political sort of moves and money moves, they matter at the end of seasons. They come to matter for championships. They come to matter for, you know, a decade-long dynasty, New York Mets and Dodgers and even Cardinals kind of stuff. So I do think it's appropriate, and I think it's the right of the fan to be able to find out as much information as you wish. As you know, however, whatever level of fandom you wish to have, I think it's our right to do so if we're putting so much money in the pockets of the players, owners, broadcasters, you know, whatever it may be. This is a spectator sport. This is a fan sport. So to be able to participate in the information as much as the money, I think it's important. I find it interesting. I learned a lot just from this initial announcement. So, you know, and when you're trying to kind of math it out, you can get pretty lost and back up and go, you know what? I don't need to know this crap. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But I do think it's important that we have access to this information. Don't you?
I agree. Yeah. And that's the thing. If you want to find it, it should be available. And that's the problem with this information is that not only is it complicated, but there's a lot of information that came out today that was almost impossible to find, and it was very herky-jerky. And the problem is this isn't entirely transparent. There's still a lot of very confusing things. I've been going back and forth with some incredible members of the St. Louis City media and kind of the Twitterverse. I mentioned two guys who cover the team a lot because they do great work, in Matt Baker and Justin Horniker. And I've been DMing with Justin because there's little things that I'm like, hey, do you know this figure? Do you know this little rule? Because I'm Googling it and two things say different things. It's a goofy thing. You know, there's a lot of complications at every level in every sport, but the MLS takes the complication to a completely different kind of level. And so any level of transparency is welcome. And to see this, and we're going to talk about it a little bit here in the podcast, to see it is great from the MLS. And so we'll dive deeper into that. And the great thing is that we'll have some fun. If you don't like the technical stuff, we'll have some fun because there is some potential, transfer news, some rumors burgeoning on the front for St. Louis City SC. So we'll have the really technical, boring stuff, my favorite, and then we'll hit Moon's favorite, the fan side too.
Yeah, we'll talk about Sam Adeniran after this. The first thing I just want to lead with is that City 2 has signed Oscar Benitez. This is the defender. So obviously, we're excited. We're excited to be bringing in some defender love and some defender blood. So they have decided to sign defender Oscar Benitez to an MLS Next Pro contract through the end of the 2024 season. The Colombian joins the club following an illustrious youth career in Brazil with RB Bragantino 2. That's cool. And then even freaking cooler, absolute fan favorite at the club, Pompeu. He will be a part of the organization, has been a part of the organization since the beginning in 2022. They have now signed him to a new MLS contract through 2026 with a club option for 2027. That's great. He's obviously risen through the organization. He began at City 2 in 2022 and has become pretty key in a lot of ways, not just to the starting lineup, but obviously the entire bench for St. Louis City SC. So that is great news. Speaking of great news, Sam Adeniran is back. That has been the hot topic for the last month now, and it seems like everybody's putting the past in the past, so to speak. I'm putting quotes up here for the video. Yeah. And we're talking very diplomatically in all these press conferences on both sides that, I'm going to give my all, and coach is saying, the past is the past. And
let's dive into some of these comments. These are all courtesy of Tom Timmerman, obviously another person who does great work around St. Louis City. Always want to read his articles because he does the best. And so here are some of the clips or some quotes from training this past week that kind of shed light onto the Sam Adeniran situation. We know what happened last week, just to refresh you on what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess I should say, before the Kansas City match. Carnell says, right now we're focused on guys who bring a certain standard, intensity, work ethic, and training, and those players will get rewarded. Sam, until further notice, will be training on his own. So that was Thursday, about 10 days ago. Here was Tuesday. Here's what Adeniran said. Don't really want to get too much into that. I kind of just want to focus on the next game because that's what's most important. I think the past is the past and just kind of want to leave that stuff in the past. Tom Timmerman then asked if he and Carnell turned the page, and Adeniran said, well, I'm here with you guys. So, yeah, if you want to look at it like that, yeah, I guess. Your thoughts on that first round, Moon?
A little bit of media training will go a long way, but I think they're doing exactly what they should do. They're not going to feed the machine any more than they need to. It's probably a pretty no nonsense, just get to business sort of training vibe, and that's spilling over into some of these press remarks and these press conferences. You know what? As it should. Some of this crap ain't our business. It's not. I would love to know it. I would love for them to get heated and all that, but do we really? I don't want any sort of heat in the dressing room, other than the competitive heat of trying to be your very best, on and off the pitch. So, I think it's good news ultimately that they figured it out. How they figured it out, probably not my business, and I don't think it's ever going to be our business. Do you?
No, not really. It is interesting to me, though, because Tom went on to kind of ask Sam, what kind of changes did you make in practice? Is that what led to this? And Sam's response was, nothing really. I just did my job. That's really all I did. Just was here for the team and did what I was supposed to do. I think I pretty much do the same thing that I've always done, and that's come out here and give 100% for the team. It might not be our business at the same time. I think those comments are a little bit illuminating on like there's been détente, there's been an agreement here, but it's interesting to me that Sam still is kind of like pushing against the idea that he wasn't giving his all at some point, because that was clearly what was said by Carnell. So I still think it's interesting that there's clearly been an agreement, but maybe it's been a kind of an agree to disagree kind of moment. Yeah,
that's a great point. That's a good thing to point out there. You're right. He has not agreed with the points that coach was making. It sounds like he was just putting time out.
Yeah, a little bit.
And the timer went off and we don't have to talk about it, and you better give it,
Hey, we're all pros. Let's move on. And here's the thing. I don't want to dive into the matchup yet for Houston, but I just want to throw this out here right now. Against Houston in the CONCACAF Cup, which obviously didn't go very well. You tied 2-2, but you lose on away goals. So against Houston, you used 2 strikers both times in the starting lineup. Do we see Sam Adeniran and João Klaus both get the start on Saturday? Or does the fact of everything in the past and the fact that Sam's only had essentially 4 trainings in the last 3 weeks, does that mean that it's 100% going to be the bench for him?
Man, great question. And it feels like whatever Coach Carnell chooses is going to be a statement. Don't you feel? I mean, that's
that's a perfect answer. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. If I've ever seen a moment, you're right.
He's got to know that it's going to be a statement to the fans. If we see Sam on the bench, it's going to be like, oh yeah, that's it. And if we see Sam out there, it's like, wow, look at this. He's saying, prove it. You know what I mean? It's going to be a big statement regardless. But we know Coach, he's pretty strategic. So I'm sure that they're just obsessing over the tape for these last couple matches with Houston, because they've already seen him a few times this early season, and it didn't go well. Like you mentioned, there was a draw, but we lost on away goals on the aggregate there to miss out on the CONCACAF Champions Cup run. So that's a big deal. You got to approach it, as you've seen this team and what they've thrown against you already. But again, they've thrown it against you in a tournament sense as well. Is that going to be different for Houston? There's going to be a lot of strategy and studying Houston when it comes to who the heck you're going to start up front. I don't know. This is a roll of the dice for me.
Well, jump forward about, I'm going to guess 8 or 9 minutes into the podcast when we're talking about the matchup, and we'll see if we talk about it again, Moon.
Yeah. Let's hear some more about the big announcement in the league transparency. This is MLS' biggest announcement when it comes to this in, I don't know, a decade or two.
Yeah, I mean, they always they always have taken steps to get a little bit better at getting the news out about these rules and trying to make things a little bit more reasonable for people to find, but it's always been kind of an uphill battle. And I think a lot of people who even love the MLS, their biggest criticism has always been and always will be just the way that the league is constructed and the salary cap and all these weird rules and general allocation money and targeted allocation money and designated players and discovery players and all this stuff. It's insane. But the MLS finally, with some transparency, release the roster profiles for all 29 teams, includes the roster designations, all the international slots, the TAMs, the targeted allocation money slots, the U22 initiative contracts, international player slots. All that stuff is now available on all the teams. They put it up in these nice little fancy little graphics that we're going to throw up on the screen right now. And it really just breaks down. There wasn't a lot of, huge groundbreaking pieces of news that came out of this for St. Louis City. It was more the confirmation of some news. One big thing that has come out is, as I was referring to earlier in my conversation with another one of the media members about what's going on, is that one of the big things came out is that St. Louis City actually has 3 designated players. I know the narrative for a lot of the last year has been, why are they not using the 3rd DP slot?
We've mentioned that multiple times on this podcast because we were confused about it. Well, they didn't have Berkey listed.
Yes, they have. We have mentioned the DP spot a lot, and so they didn't have Berkey listed, and I mean it all has to do with contracts. If your contract, they can pay you whatever they want, but if you're a DP, it only counts as X against the salary. That explains that. Target allocation money, our TAM players are players under a certain threshold, and essentially the big thing that everyone figured out is that technically, if you want to get really technical about it, is that City actually only has 1 DP, which is João Klaus, because his contract is so high, or his salary hit, depending on which way you want to phrase it. One of those actually might be incorrect. It is hit so high that he can't be brought down below the TAM level. Both Berkey and Leuven can be brought below the level. Here's why that's confuses me. Which is just Berkey's contract is higher than Klaus's and everything I've seen reported. Klaus has a longer contract because he has 2 extensions, I believe is what the city breakdown has, is that João Klaus has an extension. Let me double check this on the thing as we're looking here on the screen. Sorry, he just has a 1-year extension. My apologies. There's a couple players who do have multiple year extensions. You can see that on the right under option years. So João Klaus does have an extension year that takes him further on than Berkey. Berkey's contract expires right now in 2025. Klaus would expire in 2026 with the option year. So maybe that's why, because his contract's longer. And that's why this is just kind of confusing. I understand the thresholds. I'm just confused why Berkey, who has a reportedly higher salary, can be brought below the threshold with targeted allocation money, but while Klaus can't. And that's it. And that's the thing is, there's transparency, but at the same time, the actual money numbers and how it gets broken down, because then you have to think about how transfer fees are amortized across the length of the contract, which means they're split across the length of the contract. So that's why certain players.
Yeah, and that transfer fee is the case when it comes to Klaus's contract. No, or is it Leuven? I'm thinking just about salary. I should be, and that's the thing. I should be factoring in transfer fee with Klaus. You're 100% right, because it amortizes across the years, and because at the same time, Berkey only having 1 year left would mean that his entire contract would be hitting right now. So he should have a higher number in the first place, and this is why it gets confusing. And this is why, because I left out. I understood that transfer fees were amortized, but I left out Klaus's transfer fee only because I completely forget about transfer fees with the players who started with this team, because we were just looking at it like, oh, they're building a roster. You're 100% right. I believe it's a transfer fee that takes him over that takes his contract total number over the threshold that can be brought down by target allocation money. The transfer fee for Berkey, on the other hand, combined with the fact that he only has 1 year left on his contract, that's why he, despite being a discovery player right now, a DP right now, he's actually just barely a max TAM player and could be brought down to a TAM player from a DP. That's how it breaks down. You're a genius, Moon. Well, when it's all on paper, it's when you put it down on paper, you can see kind of how these guys, Lutz and all these guys, have to stack this kind of stuff and Tetris all the money and figure it out. And it does make it interesting because, dude, when I first heard about the designated player, the DP kind of thing, I completely misunderstood it. And I thought of it as, oh, you can only have so and so that earns more than whatever the heck it was, $2 million a year, whatever the heck the number was going to be.
It's 600. So it's $600K, and is what their contract is, what their salary hit against your salary cap is $600K.
Right. When I kept hearing,
you can pay him whatever like 20 million they're paying Messi, it still only counts as $600K against the cap.
Right, $600K against the cap. And that's what I heard. And I heard there was a maximum. And when you hear a maximum, you think, okay, the team can't pay more than the maximum. So I thought, well, so I guess the league is going to chip into there. So this is how I first understood it. A designated player, you can pay him whatever you want, and the maximum is what the team has to pay them, the league maximum. And then the MLS, since it's a single entity ownership, is gonna like pay the rest. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. Okay, I'll run with that. And each team gets only so many of these designated players. And then I'm looking at Miami the last couple of years, and I went, wait a second. You got Messi, you got Suarez, you got Busquets, you got all these things and then I hear all these numbers and I went, I've clearly got this wrong. I have clearly misunderstood this whole designated player thing. So if anything, even though I'm going to get lost in pretty much step 1 or step 2 into the weeds of these numbers, it's clarifying at least how the league is set up. Yes. And when you have exceeded the maximum, the quote maximum that a team can pay somebody with the salary stuff, then you go into the allocated money bank that the team has based on, the trades and the cash flow and the whatever. So that makes a ton more sense. They're changing these rules.
They're actively changing these rules at all times. General allocation money and target allocation money are getting changed in. If it's not next year, it's the year after that. So they even how the allocation money is separated is actually getting changed up anyhow. And so let's take a look back at the chart. The other interesting part is because, again, a lot of the designations are very interesting. But here's my thing. Here's what I'm kind of getting at here, Moon. Not having the salary and the transfer fee and those relevant numbers on this chart still makes it fairly confusing for the average person to put together a lot of these things because nowhere on this chart, because it talks even on the bottom. You can look at the bottom and see how there's a marker talking about how there'll be a mark there if a player cannot be designated from a DP to a TAM player based on their contract being brought down by the TAM money. But it doesn't say there that how much what is the threshold? Like, it doesn't even mention the part. And then you got to go do 15 Google searches to find out, and one very helpful DM to find out that it's 1.6 million. That you can bring somebody down from their salary to bring them under the 612,000. So if a player is making 2.2 million, that's pretty much the max that they can be making for their salary to be brought under the TAM threshold.
Right.
But that's not on this chart right now. That doesn't simplify things because you got to do more searches to actually find out what the heck that means. And so there still could be a lot more things that they could be much more upfront about. I do, though, like if you look at the very far right of the chart, the international slots, the designated players, the U22 initiative players, and then it breaks down the unavailable players because of loans and things like that. That stuff's very interesting because we also discovered things, which is we did not know that Isaac Jensen was a U22 initiative contract. We, in fact, talked on this podcast about how at the time the only U22 initiative contract City had was Chris Durkin, who signed it with DC. And we were wrong because we had no way to know that we were saying was wrong because the information was essentially hidden from us. So Isaac Jensen, who's out on loan, is also a U22 player. And same thing with how no one really knew the Roman Berkey thing. And now you have the international slots on the right, which really helps when you're looking forward to a summer transfer window. So I have a lot of criticism for overall what the MLS is doing, but progress should not be ignored. So good on them for doing this. Let's just keep on moving that ball forward.
Yeah, I love that. I think the tinkering and all this kind of stuff, it's healthy. We're still a young league. It's only a few decades old. And, it was the early 90s when it was like, oh, my gosh, we've got a league. Let's throw this thing together. So there's going to be a lot of growing pains for even probably the next couple decades. I think
you're not crazy there. I mean, a lot of people like to crap on the MLS because it's only been around for 20 years and things like that. But think about how English football completely reformed in the 90s and they've had to go through things like, financial fair play completely changing how things would work in there. And they've changed their roster rules on how many homegrown English players you have to have in your roster and things like that. So they've so they've changed a lot of things too. So, let's not completely crap on the MLS. The best and richest league in the world is still at times changing things and still working on a league that's only been around for 30 plus years. So we're not completely alone in this game. Very different money and popularity. I know I'm not comparing the two. I'm just saying is let's be realistic about it at the same time.
I think you're totally right. I'm all rose-colored glasses here. I'm positive about it because we're a young league and we've done nothing. Has the league gotten worse? No, it's only gotten better.
There you go.
It's only gotten better. And now we have it in St. Louis and we can bitch and moan about all of this, and I love it. Here's my suggestion. Well, just real quick with this announcement, here's my suggestion. If you love the money stuff, if you love the numbers and the puzzles, if you love puzzles, look up the details here. Go on the Post. The Post has some more details about this kind of stuff, and they even mentioned on the Post-Dispatch that there'll be another round of announcements here to clarify a little bit, to get some real deal numbers out there and announce player salaries, et cetera, in further detail. So there's more details coming. And like Rocchio mentioned, we got a couple changes that we already know are about to happen within a season or two here. So It's okay. If you love this kind of stuff, it's probably worth getting into because it's a good first step in learning how these structure changes are going to affect teams. But it's no big deal. Either way, we're moving in the right direction. And like you said, the tinkering is good.
Yeah, and also Tom Bogert over at The Athletic, who obviously does amazing work always. He also did a great breakdown on The Athletic. If you subscribe to him and them, check him out. He did a great breakdown of all these new roster rules and how it affects some of the big different teams. One quick thing as we're talking about roster rules and contracts, and hell, we even just saw the international slots for St. Louis, which are full right now. So something might have to change here because there was some news as we look forward to a summer transfer window that is about slowly coming closer and closer, Moon. That's the name that we've already talked about on this podcast, has been a German striker from Hannover 96, and that is Cedric Tukert. Well, it was just one day ago when there was an actual tweet from Hanover 96, and we tweeted, and this is translated on Twitter from German. So, excuse me if this translation is completely botched, but this is what Twitter's telling me, and I'm going to roll with it. And Manuel Veth, who covers the MLS transfer window very well, tweeted the exact same thing. So we're going to roll with it, which is Cedric Tucker will no longer play for Hanover 96 next season. He has decided a new sporting adventure and is planning to move abroad. Big thing I want to highlight there is the phrase abroad. That man's not going to another German club. He's going to a different country to play some soccer and maybe even traveling over to the great US of A to be the next striker for St. Louis City SC, Cedric Tucker. I like what's happening here for City and their potential free transfer coming down the road.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great news. Thank you for that announcement, Rocchio. Let's also hope that in this transfer window we have some defensive talk. Okay, well, hold on a second. Let's not bypass that one. Okay, so is this? I'm going to make a quick prediction here. I'm going to go with Moon wants a new left back. I would love a new left back. To be honest, I want some superstar DP center back. That's what I want. That will whip an entire. I don't care who's back there. You want to whip everybody into shape.
You want to tell Nielsen or Parker that they're on the bench now? Because I don't.
Listen, you get the right name in there, and I think those guys fight even harder. They're in better shape, and they. Okay, listen, let's talk about the KC match for a little bit, okay? We had a 3-3 draw. We had Tolman scoring, Klaus. Yeah, Pompeu. Open game. You know what happens during an open game that you cannot let happen is defensive clearings that go right to the enemy. Listen, these long balls from these defenders, they have got to put it on the foot. I would rather see dump and run ball if you are not putting it to a midfielder's foot. They gave away, I believe one of the KC goals was from a defensive pass, an errant defensive pass coming out of the backfield. You win the ball, you can't lose it at the 40. You can't lose it there. On that kind of ball, if you have control of that ball and you can't put it to one of your midfielders, do anything else with it. But there's a lot of miscues there after winning and after some decent defending. Then having a turnover with that first touch. And I think, I don't remember, it's been a few weeks now. I think there were multiple cases of those long ball passes that were intended for our midfielders that went right to KC players that either ended up in a goal scored or a goal scoring opportunity. That kind of stuff has got to stop. And I think if you have a captain back there that's a little bit just more intense, and dude, I hate to bring up LAFC, but you bring in the LAFC model and they won a championship and had a complete turnaround with that squad. Why? Because they brought in just an ultimate freaking bad A veteran defender who by all accounts was 10 points slower than anybody around him. But he just whipped that defensive line.
You talking about Bonucci?
No, I'm talking about
this year or talking about years ago? Or talking about a few years ago when they made it? Yeah, years ago. It wasn't Bonucci? Okay.
No, shoot. Why can't I think of his name right now? I use him as an example.
I agree with you. There's nothing I hate more than wasting possessions out of the back line. It pisses me off to no end. I can't stand teams that just boot it down there when they don't actually have the players to win the headers. And I hate stupid turnovers from the back line as well. You're not wrong. The defense needs to tighten up. I think part of it is just when you play this wide open of a scheme and you don't have world-class midfields in front of you, and you're constantly having your center backs play above the half line, the majority of the game, you're going to get scored on. You're going to win 3-2 games. I think I'm not saying they want to do that, because I sure as hell know that Berkey will lose it if he consistently has games where he gives up 3 goals on this defense. He will lose it. But I just that's the style they've chosen to play. It's why. Yeah. You could have made a couple different changes along the way, and that's what we're going to see from City. I think the defense is going to get put on an island, and they're going to get beat because there's a lot of freaking space to get beat in soccer, and that's the way it is. And I don't know necessarily if anything more than a world-class defender would be able to cover the amount of ground that Parker and Nielsen have to cover one-on-one against some of these players.
Yeah, I've been up since 3 a.m., so I was blanking on the legendary Giorgio Chiellini.
Oh, Chiellini. I was saying the wrong Italian guy. That's my fault. My apologies to Leonardo Bonucci and Giorgio Chiellini, the former Pink Lady defensive pairing, also that of the Forza Italia national side.
That's what I mean. Like I watched Chiellini for years and years and years, and he comes to LA.
I locked in. I'm like Italy, Juve defender Bonucci, and it's like no, it's the other one, Giorgio Chiellini. My apologies, I screwed you up there. That's my fault. That's my fault.
No, I couldn't think of it, and I've watched Chiellini for 20 years.
Juventus is how I got into world soccer. So and literally in like 2009 when they're the heart of the team. That's God. I feel bad about that one, Moon. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry to all of our listeners because we sound like I sound like a brainless person, which I am by this point on a Friday after so many shows. But man, we got a big weekend ahead of us. We don't have Chiellini to watch; he's retired now. But we have a great St. Louis City SC squad that I think will dominate Houston. I really do. I think that they've got an axe to grind here with being knocked out of the CONCACAF Champions Cup by that again. Just a sad, horrible letdown of losing on away goals from aggregate against Houston Dynamo earlier in the season. Still, St. Louis City is leading the series 2-1-1 against Houston, unbeaten in league play, 1-0-1 against the Dynamo. So they've got the better end of the stick here, and I think they've got a better squad overall, but Houston's no pushover.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's give Moon a little time to rest here. Let's hear a little bit from Bradley Carnell in the weekly press conference from yesterday. Let's run through a couple of big things here. The first one right now, Bradley Carnell talks about the Houston matchup in relation to their loss early in the season, and he thinks how it can be a little bit different.
Yeah, it gives you opportunities to jump. We like to hunt the ball. We like to chase the ball. We like to play. It's no secret where we like to play the game and how we like to enforce our principles. And it gives us a good opportunity. But we have to treat it with respect. It can't be careless. It can't be loose. It can't be random. It has to be synchronized, organized, connected with each other. Because if you don't do it all together, then they can hurt you. So, and they have some very good tools to do it. And they've shown that even, in the absence of Herrera, they can still do that, with Basi, still very good technical players, Kowalczyk popping underneath. Like these things are predictable, they're going to happen, but sometimes it's very difficult to stop. So, yeah, they're a good soccer team.
I love it.
That's Carnell talking about how can the press work against that Houston team. He mentioned Kowalczyk. He knows how he can pop up. He got a goal against St. Louis City in the CONCACAF Cup matchup. He also mentioned some injuries. Herrera obviously hasn't been able to be dynamic on the Houston side. He's only appeared in 2 games this season. Neither of them has been starts. They still have other people who are making some big moves. There is a potential injury that will be huge. We just talked about it. You're getting beat down the side a lot. You're getting beat on the flanks, you're getting beat just over and over again consistently. How can you kind of bounce back around that? Well, potentially Houston's going to be missing one of their best players. Their right back is going to be out of the game, potentially Griffin Casey. Here's what Carnell said about that potential availability.
Yeah, I can't say who they're going to put in there, what scenarios. We've gone through different scenarios and prepared and planned adequately for that. At the end of the day, we just have to, we can't be inside those locker room or those coaches' offices. We can just prepare what we want to prepare. And I think we'll be fine just doing what we want to do. So, the minute you start overthinking what the opponent will do, then that just consumes time from you. And I think we'll gain valuable time thinking about us. And I think that's what we have done over the last couple of weeks is put the emphasis on us. And we've been pretty difficult to play against.
I think he's right.
With that said, Griffin Dorsey is the right back for Houston. He's one of only 4 players on the Dynamo who started all 9 games in the MLS for them. He started both of the CONCACAF games against St. Louis City at that right back spot. And that's huge because we've seen what right backs have been able to do getting down the left side of City. Indy makes things tough on those guys, but if you can get down that left side, Anthony Marcanic at times, he's pushing up opposite. There can be some openings there on that side against City. City's defensive left, Houston's right. So not having a guy like Griffin Dorsey, that could be really big for Houston. I think Carnell's minimizing really how much of an impact that could have, giving them a little bit of safety over there on the flanks.
For sure. And Houston is coming off of a 2-game losing streak. They fell to Austin and Dallas.
Dallas is, Austin's on an upbeat. They've won 4 out of 5, but Dallas is second to last in the West. They're bad, and that was an interesting downturn for the Houston Dynamo. That's for sure.
Yeah, Houston is not the king of Texas right now. St. Louis has scored 9 goals in 4 away matches this season, earning at least a point in 3 of those matches. St. Louis has an all-time away MLS record of 6-9-6, scoring about 30 goals in that span. I think Alm and Durkin are both coming off of really good runs. Alm, I believe, had his second assist in 2 games, and then Durkin had one as well. So I think those guys are starting. I think, obviously, Totland, Klaus. You think Pompeu starts?
I think Pompeu starts. But I have some bad news, Moon.
Oh,
I got some bad news. It's not 100%, and either way, whether or not he will or won't start. But here's Bradley Carnell and Chris Durkin talking about his potential injury that might hold him out from this game.
Yeah, he's in the room. That's a good sign. So, we still have a couple of hours before kickoff, and every hour is valuable. So, yeah, it'll be a game time decision. So, yeah, we'll get him ramped up and ready. And if he can play, I'm sure he's in contention, and I'm sure he'll then be able to play. So, yeah.
How would you categorize the midfield depth, regardless of if Chris can go? Jose, Akil?
Yeah, I think it's fluid. We had some good performances last week from the guys who didn't accrue so many minutes of late. So they put themselves in a good stand, and to get that volume of minutes is valuable, right? Especially at the intensity City 2 plays at, and it was a good exercise for us. I think we're fluid. I think there's a couple of guys that can pop into that spot. I think Jackson can pop in there if necessary. I think Indy can pop in there as he did last year. So there's a couple of options that we're trying to if Dirks can't go, but right now we're planning with him.
Yeah, it's progressing. Just a weird knock in the game against City 2 on past Saturday, but doing everything I can to be out in the field, and it's definitely been progressing, which I've been happy with.
Yeah, so you're feeling good?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. It's a conversation I need to have with the physio, doc, coaches on what makes sense. And like Coach said, it'll be a game time decision. And yeah.
Interesting stuff.
He knocked his knee. He knocked his knee in the scrimmage against St. Louis City 2 this past Saturday. So that was the injury for Durkin. So again, he's going to be a game time decision. You heard Carnell there mention the potential subs. If he's not able to go, AZ Jackson, Indy Vasilev. You heard Matt Baker asking about maybe Jose Kojima. I had a feeling this would get you a little activated, Moon, and a little bit worried for this game.
It doesn't worry me for the game. Here's what it worries me. And I love the fact that we do have, as Coach called it, a fluid midfield. But, man, you know what I really want to see? I want to see a starting 11. I want to see a static
starting 11 that's locked in.
I really do. Listen, it's always good when you got a deep bench. I
love when Coach said this, but I want the complete opposite, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying it's a great thing. It's a great thing that we have options. It really is. But, just to build and build and build, I would really like to see us not talking about who's going to do it, who's going to start, who's not, you know what I mean? I just think we would benefit. And, we're still a new team, second season in.
I mean, other than Durkin potentially being out for injury, I don't think there's going to be any changes to the starting 11. I think it'll be pretty much the exact same because, I mean, there's not a spot. There's not another spot I'd switch out. I mean, unless he's out, and then that would cause some switches. I think probably if I was him, I'd go Indy and Ostrak instead of AZ into the starting lineup. I'd probably maybe go Alm instead of Indy at the right spot, and then move Indy back. But yeah, I think other than maybe Alm switching in for Pompeu or Indy, I'm really happy with the fact that it seems like there's a top 11 or a top 13, and I'm okay with that.
Still, yeah, I'm okay with that too. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. I would love to see the 11. And we still haven't even mentioned Leuven. What's that timetable? When he comes back, what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about all this again and the fluidity of who the heck is going to work best with him and all of it, So, yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. I do think that Durkin's probably going to start. That's just my flip a coin. This is what I'm putting my dollar on. But
I'm okay. Here's the thing. I'm legitimately worried about this game if he doesn't start.
You really are, huh?
I mean, this is Houston is second in possession, and in the games in the CONCACAF, which again you won one of them 2-1, and Chris Durkin was literally playing his first 2 games of competitive football with this team. But in those games, and they're second in the league with 57% possession. In that first game, they had 64% possession. or 60% possession, excuse me. And in the 1-0 win in Houston, they had 68% possession. And they used it effectively. And I know there's a lot of games that City plays where City only has about 30% of possession, and they win those games. But Houston's better than that. They're able to keep possession better than that. And more importantly, do you imagine them losing the ball very much in the midfield if Chris Durkin isn't playing? And Chris Durkin even said it. We don't have the clip, but Chris Durkin even said it in his post game, or in the press conference, that the best way to beat Houston is going to be disrupting them in the midfield. Well, if he's not there, I just don't know if I'm confident about Indy Vassilev and Tomas Ostrak being able to consistently hassle that midfield to the level they're going to need to not have another repeat.
Yeah, I just think we're going to go in there with an intensity that Houston isn't ready for. I think Houston's on not a great spirit. If you watch just some of the highlights and things from their last 2 matches, you're just like, what is this team doing now?
They are struggling.
Yeah, it's they just seem like lost puppies, and I think that we go in there and I don't want to say what I was just going to say.
No. I was about to say we're putting predictions on.
And we just start kicking puppies off the bridge like Anchorman.
All right, prediction on the match, Moon.
I think it's gonna be 2-0 or 2. You know what? No, I'm gonna stick with 2-0 because Berkey deserves a clean sheet.
All right, that's fair. I'm going 1-1 draw.
Oof. Rocchio with the cloud.
I'm sorry, guys. I don't like it. I don't like it, and neither will anyone else watching the match. But I think that's what's going to happen.
St. Louis City SC takes on Houston May 4th, Saturday, 7:30 in Houston at Shell Energy Stadium. Rocchio only sees one coming from us, but hey, that's at least one goal.